In southwest Scotland, there's a place called Doon Valley. The valley runs from the southern uplands all the way to the central lowlands, following the course of the Doon River, which is fed from Loch Doon. What makes the Doon Valley special is during the 1800s, several new villages were constructed, which is a little unusual for the area. These new villages were Patna, Waterside, Benwat, Lethen Hill, Burnfoot Hill, Corby Craigs and Craigmark. All but 3 of these villages have been lost to time. You see, most of these villages are considered hill villages, so if they were still around today, it's likely you'd be able to see them out over here on the ridge line. But that's just not the case today. All these small villages had a connection, and that would end up failing, leading to 5 of them becoming abandoned. So in the middle of the valley, there are some abandoned structures that you might be able to see behind me. These are the remains of the old brickery here called the Naskin. Now these buildings actually predate the brickery and were originally part of the Dunaskin Ironworks, which is linked to all the villages around here. Now the ironworks operated from 1850 until 1921, where the brickery took over in about 1929. The brickery itself lasted until the 1970s, where the demand of bricks fell so much that they made a stockpile of them here and they just shut it all down. But our story involves the ironworks, not the brickery. You see, the villages around here were all created to house the miners who gathered the resources for the old ironworks. You had the miners for getting the ore out of the ground, and you also had the miners providing the coal, which the furnaces here would be run off of. By the 1930s, 10 years after the ironworks had closed down, a lot of the villages had become rather rundown due to the lack of work and maintenance done to the place. So with the conditions that bad, the government stepped in and decided to remove the people and demolish the housing. The places that they sent them was to 2 main villages in the Doon Valley, one of them being Dalmellington, which is down that way a few miles, and the other one being Patna, which is where we are right now. They did this by building a lot of council housing, and that's where a lot of it comes from. It's from when they were moving people to here from the other villages. And a lot of that council housing survives and is still in use to this day. Once the people had been evacuated, they decided to demolish what was left of these villages, and what's left of these is small ruins just dotted around the hillside, along with war memorials. The war memorials being the most prominent feature of any of the former villages. Right now we're up at Lethen Hill, and as you might be able to see behind me, that is one of the few things that actually remains of the old village here. Now Lethen Hill is also got a twin to it, so we might be looking at its twin. But it seems that the opposite, they turned what was part of the village into a forest, and they've cut it down, so we can actually see some of the ruins still here. Waterside is actually the best example of how these villages would have looked, because it is still in its roughly original configuration. These villages were made up of miners' rows. That's small little cottages all joined together that are very cramped, and they're just built quickly to house the miners and their families. Waterside also has a church in it, and it used to have a pub down there. And I'm aware that some of them had schools, like very small schools, but I don't know if having a church or a pub was a common thing. Waterside is right next to the Dunaskin Ironworks, so it's possible that they had extra privileges being right next to it, while the other ones were a little bit further apart. It's possible. Most of these villages are no longer properly accessible. This is probably the most accessible one out of all of them, and I only found it because I scourged the satellite imagery from Google Maps. So the road up to this one is here, but it's very rocky in places and not very well maintained at all. So if you're wanting to come here, I would actually suggest parking down in Patna and walking up here. You can bring a bike up most of it. I would suggest a mountain bike, maybe a gravel bike for some of it, but there's just some of it where it's just like, no, it's loose rocks. You're going to be walking it. It's the best way to do it. And that's the story of the small villages in the Doon Valley. Now there is one more village which is behind me called Dalmellington that I haven't really gone over. That's because Dalmellington is considerably older than all the other villages that we went over today. The rest of them were all built in 1800s, where there's no record of when that was actually built. There have been records of a settlement here since last 6,000 years. So your guess is as good as mine as to when that was built. So yeah, that's why we didn't go over it, even though it is just as important as the rest of them. Mining did continue in the area until about 2010, where they were still extracting coal up here in the open cast mines. But that's now all shut down, and in fact they're doing a regeneration process to put it back to roughly what it was before. There was even a bunch of people who tried to turn the old ironworks into a museum, but that closed down in the early 2000s, which is also quite sad. I did manage to go to that as a child, but as fun as it was, I don't remember very much of it. I do remember the climbing frames. Now this is a very condensed history of the Doon Valley. I've obviously skipped a lot of it, but hopefully you found this interesting. If you would like to know more or to visit the area, I would recommend looking up the Doon Valley Railway. So it's a heritage railway run by volunteers, and occasionally they do open days. So I'd recommend coming to that. Or if you've got the free time and you're around here, maybe help volunteer at that, because it's all volunteer run. I think the next open day is in Easter, so hopefully this video is out before then, but it's well worth a visit. If you did enjoy this, please let me know. If you've got any further information about here, I would love to know, because I know very little about these villages, even though I spent several days trying to find information on them. There's just not that much around. But yeah, thanks for coming along with me, and we'll be continuing on. I'm gonna walk down this hill now. I think it's smart to walk it. People are probably gonna start wondering where I am, because this is normally like a 2-hour ride, and I'm definitely over the 3-hour mark. Stopping to make videos adds time. Who knew? But anyway, thanks for coming, and I'll see you all in the next one. Okay, bye.